Today's Thursday, August 20th, 2020. The time is 9 a.m. This is our weekly Board of County Commissioners meeting with our Community Development Organization. Calling this meeting to order, and attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Kathy, would you lead us, please, in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, then. Do we have any potential conflicts of interest? No. Hearing none. Okay, moving forward. The first item on our agenda is, in fact, the signing, and it's ordinance number 550, case number ZO-N19-0007, Hutter Properties, LLC, to complete a zone change from commercial with a conditional zoning development agreement, the CZDA, to commercial on 2.95 acres of land. Vlad, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. Staff has prepared an order of decision for your review and signing. We have also prepared a zone change ordinance to take effect with the approval of this decision.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we execute the order of decision and ordinance number 550.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Executing the order of decision. That's it, I think.
That's it?
Yeah, it's two signatures.
You sure?
Yep. You bet. Thanks. Okay, so that concludes the signing section. Moving on to the business segment of our meeting, community development update. And Director Callahan, what I'd like to do is reverse the order, because I think item A might take a little bit longer than the other two. So why don't we begin with item C, which is the appointment of Carl Joseph Granrath to fill the vacant hearing examiner position, and a potential action item. Go ahead, Director Callahan.
Commissioners, we've been short a hearing examiner for 10 long months. I've had two applicants. The first one wasn't up to snuff. This one is. In this case, he has a Juris Doctorate from Gonzaga, and it helps that his wife is a planner, and he's attended conferences on planning, so he has an understanding of land use law. And having met with him in person, I am confident that he would be a very good hearing examiner for us. He's got the right attitude, the right approach, the right demeanor. He understands the differences in Idaho from Washington, ideologically and otherwise. And so that's why the contract was in your electronic file, and has been reviewed by Pat. And if you're comfortable with it, I'd appreciate going ahead and authorizing this so that we can let him know and start using him.
Wonderful. Any questions for David? David, has he done this before?
No, he's had some jobs outside of, he's a recent graduate, but he's had jobs since then, but more as a clerk to judges. Mm-hmm. And in this case, this would be the first sort of thing land use related that he's done. But I'm comfortable that anyone with a Juris Doctorate can do what we need.
Got it. I'm fine. Motion?
I move that we authorize the appointment of Carl Joseph Granrath to fill the hearing examiner position.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is carried for the appointment of Carl Joseph Granrath to the position of hearing examiner. Item B, direction on the extent to which public documents should be available online, and it's a potential action item.
By way of quick background, most municipalities, including cities and counties, make all of their records, especially building permits, land use planning files like the one you just approved, and that Vlad handles on a routine basis. Usually everywhere, that's all public information. You walk in, you ask for it, it's yours. Or you go online in today, and it's yours, because it's public information. The last Board of County Commissioners and the preceding board were not as comfortable with that because Commissioner Bingham didn't like the notion of having floor plans available online. His concern was that someone or ones could stock and, case a home ahead of time, and that would make it easier for crime to occur. And Commissioner Everline agreed with it, so for some time we haven't been allowing all of our plans, like floor plans, to be available online. My experience with these things is burglars are going to do what they're going to do regardless of what's available online, frankly. And my preference would be to go back to making things available because it's public information. If a burglar walks in our front door and we don't know he's a burglar, and they ask for this information, we have to give it to them because it's public.
Sure.
In that case, they just ask for it under the Open Records Act.
Right, but wouldn't we have record of that person asking for this floor plan?
Well, we'd have a signed, but we wouldn't know that she or he's a burglar until they get caught.
Right. But if it's just available online, then they can do their stalking or whatever without anybody knowing.
That's the rationale of the previous board, is that we should keep these things limited. I will tell you, with our current Trackit system, it's difficult. It's not user-friendly. And so we've had to manually go in and check things and uncheck things and so on and so forth. But it's come up again because people continue to ask us, can we just get this? And I say, no, you need to add for floor plans.
Right.
And other things.
So what about your new system that you intend to implement over the next year?
That's the sort of thing we're looking for in the new, whatever we buy, is that it would be much easier to control these things. And the ones that we've interviewed, that's been the case.
In a formal investigation, someone could trace IP addresses to inquiries that were made on a specific floor plan, couldn't they?
Yeah, that's an IT question.
That's
We'd
an
have to
IT
ask
question,
James.
yeah.
I would think so, but I'm no expert in those
Yeah.
matters.
I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead.
You could get the IP address, but then, that may narrow down the list of people that you'd be looking at, but it would, it still wouldn't necessarily point you to one particular person.
Sure.
Right. So Pat, what is your thought on this privacy versus public document? And I like the fact that, we have a record of somebody who came in, but what's...
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of torn on the building plan thing. I know there's probably a lot of building plans online already, but I think I'm mainly would be concerned about commercial buildings and public buildings. In fact, the evacuation and emergency response plans for public buildings is already exempt from disclosure.
Okay.
So would you suggest maybe we make a distinction, Pat?
Oh, in fact, the statute includes plans, blueprints, security codes, et cetera. So I think I would at a minimum keep any plans for public buildings off online.
Good point.
Because those are already exempt from disclosure. But as far as private buildings, I think that's really your call. We can require people to come in and look at those plans like we have been, or we can put them online. I don't know that the risk is super great when it comes to that. Like I said, I think there's probably all kinds of building plans online already. But at the same time, if you don't want to put those online, I'd support that.
I think,
There is
I think when we don't put,
Aside-
when we don't put
aside from
things
that, I think
online,
anything that is a public record can be online.
when we don't put things online, it makes people suspicious of government. When they say, why can't I see that?
agree.
Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead,
Well, I
Pat.
agree with that. I think. Sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to talk.
No, go ahead.
Go right ahead, Pat.
I was just making the point that, for the most part, I agree generally. That's why I was possibly carving out a narrow exception for building plans. But again, if you want to put those online, aside from public buildings, which those plans are exempt from disclosure under the Public Records Act, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director, yeah, David, go
Exemption
ahead.
there's no general exemption or prohibition from putting those online. There have been concerns in the past raised about copyrights, but copyright is held by the person who made the plans, and it would be up to that person to enforce them in case of an infringement.
Not necessarily the owner. Right, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, David, go right ahead.
There is one distinction the state law makes that we must uphold, and that is any sworn officer that wants to be redacted so that their information is not online, we must follow that, because that's just state law. And we've been doing that, we intend to continue. So that much you can just exclude. My concern is, what do we do with everything else?
When we took that up with the prior board, I was the dissenting vote. And one of the reasons I voted, I said that I felt that the situation that Bob Bingham raised, that the probability was, to me, infinitesimally small, weighed against a greater probability, which I know for a fact, where realtors and appraisers in particular need to access that information. If that information is not readily available, not so much for realtors, okay, but for appraisers, they're coming down here. Guess who's going to pay for that? Because you're paying for their time, up go the fees. So why not make it available? Because it needs to be accessed on a routine basis. So I think the risks are far outweighed by the rewards. I mean, if somebody wants to case your home, they're going to find a way to case it. I truly believe that, but that's where I come from. But the exemption that Pat refers to, I'm obviously all for it.
And the one David referred to, that's another very narrow exception.
Yes, thank you.
That's carved out in state law.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I'll be the dissenting then, because I have kids, and with the prevalence of human trafficking nowadays, I just rather be more safe than sorry. But that's just my thought.
Go ahead.
Do
you have any thoughts?
Motion?
Yeah, if you're up to it, go ahead.
This is a no-brainer to me. I move that we direct the planning and zoning to make all documents, with that limited exception of law enforcement people, available online.
And public building plans.
Oh, and public building plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever the law says.
Yeah, those are two very narrow exceptions that are allowed for in state law,
Okay?
Okay.
specifically.
Okay. I will second the motion.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye, and the motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on to item A, discussion of possible growth control research and measures, and this is a discussion item only. Director Callahan, please.
Well, at the last board meeting, one of these 9 o'clock sessions, Chris and Bill hung around and mentioned that you'd like to have a discussion. And so I put it on the agenda for that purpose. I can lead off and just suggest
Go
that
ahead.
there's a storied history to growth management, dates back to 1972. I've learned about it all through college. It's been ongoing debate, argument, sometimes vigorously so, ever since. What we might do to help you out with this, if you're interested, I could ask the staff to just put together a white paper for you, which I would think we could do in less than 10 pages, just give you an overview of here's what's been done where over the last 48 years. There's such topics as concurrency, which has been done in Florida and Washington, where the state legislatures intervened and said municipalities must show a link between new subdivisions and their infrastructure. So they don't actually approve new subdivisions until the roads and water and sewer and everything's there. Those are somewhat extreme cases, but they exist and for some considerable time. In Colorado, I had personal experience with Boulder County, where we had a quarter of a century of taxing locally for the purchase of public open space. And so by the time I had left, which was a decade ago now, the county had 58,000 acres that it had purchased in open space. And what was interesting about that as a growth management issue is that there had been such an influx of development and development pressures in Colorado, and in particular in the Boulder area, that all the good farmland was being eaten up by developments and sprawl. And so the politicians in the cities and the counties got together and they agreed on a multiple sort of front approach where the county rezoned the entire county from a minimum lot size of 5 acres to a minimum lot size of 35 acres. That was a big jump, but it was supported by the local community because they were up to here with growth. Another thing they did with their open space program is, since there was such development pressure, they put into place a leaseback arrangement so that the county and the cities were buying land, but they automatically leased it back to farmers who back then and now were being highly pressured. It's hard to make the same money return or market return on land if you're just farming, as opposed to selling out to a developer that's willing to pay 4, 5, 10 times as much all at once. And so this was, from that way, a method of keeping farming on the land in that county. There were intergovernmental agreements reached between the county and each of its cities, so that by policy and by practice, growth would occur in the cities and not the county. And then there was what was called a transfer development rights program between the county and landowners, where because all these other things were in place, it was possible for a homeowner who had, I'll make this up, 40, 50, 100 acres or whatever, to sell off development rights and keep their existing property now with a transfer development right, a blanket on it in the assessor's records, so they couldn't develop it anymore, but they would transfer their development right into an area near a city where the developer, after buying 20, 30, 40 of these, could then create more density in the county next to a city. So I bring these up as just there's all sorts of variations on a theme of ways to address growth pressures. I thought it might be useful for you to have a synopsis of some of that in a white paper. I think the staff would find it interesting to do the research and put it together for you. And I'll just lead off with that. I don't really have any other suggestions.
So there's not just one way to do this,
There are many ways
whole bunch
to
of ways
approach
and
this.
combinations and
I neglected to bring up the concept of limiting building permits. Lakewood, Colorado did that for over a decade. And they did it in a way similar to concurrency. They only issued out, I'm making this up, but 120 building permits a year. And that was because that's what their public works staff had determined. That's about how much capacity they had to get water and sewer out in front of new development.
but this wouldn't impact anything that the cities do. Just like
No,
we-
ours wouldn't.
No, ours
If you-
would. That's what I'm
right.
saying, just like we saw in the paper this morning, how many,
Yeah, cities are still on their own, and
we don't have any,
except
there.
if we started to have the conversation of intergovernmental agreements,
okay,
would the cities be receptive to the notion of shunting development their way? And how would we make that happen? As a way of encouraging open land in the county where it could still be farmed or something, or agricultural uses.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the cities would in our case. I think, at least historically, they have. And one of the ways we could accomplish whatever the board wanted to accomplish in this regard would be to renegotiate our ACI agreements. We're just coming to the end of the process with Hauser, and our coordinated ACI agreement with Ratham, Hayden, and Post Falls, I think, is overdue for negotiation as well. So we can, consider some of these things in that context, as well as others.
So playing devil's advocate, someone listening in potentially might say, gee, thanks a lot. Now you're trying to hustle us all into the cities and round us up. I know, we know that's going to come forward. Go ahead. You want to take a stab?
Well, you two brought this up. It's,
Okay.
I don't
Let
know.
me-
I
but,
don't think having a white paper is going to.
Oh, no,
But,
I don't.
I think that's what we're talking about today.
I will be so bold as to say this is potentially politically difficult.
It is difficult.
It's the sort of thing, in my experience, I've worked for Boulder County for 12 years. What made it easy there is you had a quarter of a century of people that were behind limited growth and municipal control of growth. And all because if you were to do a Google zoom over Boulder County, you see that it left farming land farming, and it consolidated growth in the cities. That community at large politically believed that was the right thing to do for a quarter of a century, and they still do. You, to my knowledge, don't have that solidarity. I don't know what all of the county thinks. And to me, that would be the starting point, is get a better sense for whether we use some sort of survey techniques or media, Facebook. I'm not the expert in that.
Given growth or taxes, what are people most concerned about?
Right, or
you're
what?
asking-
I'm asking you.
Well, in my political Facebook, the questions or concerns or hits, however they define it on Facebook, was 10-to-1 growth versus taxes. I don't think property taxes are the issue. No, that's a whole other matter. It is for some folks, but not as big as most people think. Growth is a big issue. And that essentially is what prompted me to raise the issue with you. And I think the white paper's a great, just off the cuff, you raised one situation where the county could potentially purchase land. Okay, fine. That might or might not work here in the intergovernmental agreements. The other one is a moratorium. And of course, we'll get lynched outside by the real estate community because that's a curse. And when we talk moratorium, as we all know, there are limits, right? There's a 6-month limit, and I believe there's a condition of impending harm or something to that effect.
Yes, you have to
Okay.
find there's imminent harm.
Okay, and then a third possibility is, and you touched on it, David, is limit the permits on a lottery system. We're gonna issue so many per year, you're going into a hat. And again, there'll be objections to that too, but there's a whole, and there may be more that I just haven't thought of.
Hence a white paper.
Hence a white paper. What do you think, Leslie?
Doesn't hurt to research and look at these things, but I'll tell you what, it's not the role of government to plan growth, just plan for growth. So, see what,
Yep, that's an interesting discussion.
I was going to say,
in and of
the
itself.
distinction is lost on me, but
well, planning growth, meaning it's gonna happen here, it's gonna happen here, we're not gonna allow it here, we're gonna, control it here, or plan for growth. Okay, we know that the ACIs are coming, so we know that, infrastructure needs to be put in, and so on down the line.
I don't see the difference.
Well, and the thing is, if you have infrastructure, which by now most communities do, for the most part, where there are cities of any size or towns, that infrastructure beckons that development occur within some reasonable proximity so that the infrastructure can accommodate it or be expanded in a way that's affordable. So if a developer comes along and decides, well, I'm going to put in, hypothetically, 105-acre lots, I'm going to be 10 miles outside of town. and the water situation is such that it can't be accommodated either by individual wells, or for that matter, even a community system, what do you do?
Ostensibly, we
an-
deny the subdivision. but-
Exactly. You know, now if he were to change his scope and say, okay, I'll bring it in closer, then the city can jump in, or the particular jurisdiction, and just say, okay, fine, we can afford to do this. So, and that's a case where government plans, but government is planning based on where the efficiencies are. I mean, what is it gonna cost? Who are you gonna burden to run that service if in fact, you know, the individual wells or community system just don't work? I don't know. Pat, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a little point, and it's just factual. It's not. I'm not trying to persuade one way or another, but when the comp plan process was going on, that ended up in the adoption of the 2010 comp plan, the split between population between cities and the unincorporated county was about 70-30.
That's true.
Since then, in this decade, though, a higher percentage of new population has gone into the cities. The growth, it's been around 80-20 cities to counties. And so I think, you know, for a lot of people, cities are more, you know, the more desirable place to live. So that may help drive the discussion of, you know, what growth controls may be needed or whether they're needed at all. Or maybe they're needed on the Ratham Prairie, but not so much in the rest of the county. So I just wanted to make the point about the population trend in cities versus the unincorporated county. And we're not seeing, I can say from my own observation, is we're not seeing the scale of subdivisions that we did in the aughts decade between 2000 and 2010. Even after we recovered from the Great Recession, we haven't seen subdivision development in the unincorporated county on that scale. They've for the most part been within cities.
I think that's referring to a case he litigated where it was 570-something units, Chateau De Lore.
Oh, my goodness.
And that, we haven't had that magnitude of
Oh,
development
no,
since
that's
then.
correct. That's true.
Yeah.
Or the other one that was defeated by a prior board
Yes.
up in Athol. I don't remember the name of the subdivision.
Even that one only
Yeah.
had 100-something, 150 lots. or
150
so.
lots, yeah.
I mean, that's a lot for the county. but
Yeah,
it's-
that was the one that would have been over by Silverwood.
Yes.
Right.
Anyway, so back to the white paper. Yeah. I mean, it's a worthwhile exercise. But I think to Leslie's point, there are philosophical issues that have to be addressed, and the community has to come to grips with that. And if people want to take the approach that says, you know, government needs to, for the most part, stay out of it, so be it. But do me a favor, don't call me then. Stop complaining. I'm part of the problem. How's that? I'll make it easy. I moved here 20 years ago. I'm part of the problem. For that matter, most of us who live in this community are part of the problem. So that is to say, contributing to growth. But it is what it is.
So what's your preference? Would you like us to do a white paper?
Sure.
Do it.
Okay. We'll get on it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so that's it.
That's it.
And then we have public comment.
Yes, public comment. Yes, sir.
Can you
We'll
come?
need your name and address.
Tim Bowles, 6659 West Orchard Avenue. On the growth, and right now, I understand it. But many years ago, and I don't remember exactly when, the county commissioners did a deal on what they called the green zone across the Ratham Prairie. There was something probably 15 years or so ago, and I don't remember exactly, and to limit the growth across the prairie for sizes of subdivisions and pieces. And I think the council as well as the planning and zoning need to look into the future. I mean, the Ratham Prairie is just getting gobbled up. And if you look into Post Falls, well, I will pick on Post Falls. As far as I'm concerned, if they see $1 worth of tax money, they'll let you build whatever you want. It doesn't matter what it has to do with quality of life or what it's doing to the prairie. I mean, all this stuff is right over the aquifer. And I'm not a tree hugger by any means. I mean, I worked in the woods growing up, and I farmed and ranched. But I think we need to do something to limit or at least organize the growth on the prairie to sizes of lots, et cetera, so that we can continue to have a prairie. Because there's not going to be any prairie. The way things are going with developers coming in, they buy a piece of land and all they see is dollar signs. They don't see quality of life. The people on our road, we've got, I think there's 11 lots on our road, and there's 7 families on it. We've all got 10 acres. Each one of us, with the exception of the 2 in the front that border Meyer Road, bought there with the basic understanding, and it's not in our covenants or anything, but the understanding is this was a subdivision, 10 acres apiece, and it wasn't going to be chopped up. And now people are trying to do that to make it smaller and stuff, and I understand I understand people wanting this. This is what we wanted after I worked my whole life to get what our family wants so that we can have the quality we've got. And at the time, my wife and I have discussed it a lot. At the time, you know, if we could have only afforded 5 acres, you know, that would have been great for us. But we waited longer to get what we wanted, to get the piece of land we wanted. We've worked 47 years to accomplish what we've got. And I think we just need to look at the prairie more reasonably because, I mean, like they were mentioned this morning, Ratham just did another 238 approval, 238 approval this morning. And I understand it from the farmer standpoint, that was all dairy farm and stuff up there originally. Well, now their people are getting old, they can't farm it. Everybody's, and they're seeing dollar signs too, you know, with retirement. I mean, I understand that, but these subdivisions that do that, can't we, you know, do like, kind of like Dalton. Dalton's is, you know, the Dalton acre, but only out on the prairie do 10 acres so that people, they're not crowded. I mean, you look at just above the high school up here on Ramsey Road. I mean, they've got those cracker boxes up there, and I think they look like hell personally. I mean, they're just shoving everything into everything.
Thank you for that. Vlad, did you want to speak?
Commissioners, I'd like to have Pat Braden comment on the testimony presented by this gentleman. I am concerned about due process because the gentleman is discussing the location where he resides and the property in question that is currently under the review of a zone change. I don't want to state the specific case, but I am concerned that any discussion or any further discussion, if you will, on this matter by the board could violate due process because we have an ongoing application that's under review by Kootenai County Community Development.
Okay. Yep. I'll come right back to you, sir. Pat, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay if he comments, but I would just, you know, I think the board should just, you know, acknowledge the comment, and, but not discuss it further if there's a
Understood.
Land use application on the table right now.
Okay. Go right ahead, sir.
And I don't know whether I said it before earlier or not, but I'm not yes, this one does affect me, but I'm trying to look forward to the whole prairie. I think it's something we need to plan. Whatever happens at the deal tonight happens. I mean, it is what it is, but we've got to look forward down into the future to try to regulate some of this so that other people who want to build or have ranchettes or whatever, you know? I mean, we raised all our grandkids 4-H animals. That's why we bought it, so we could do stuff
Sure.
like that. And we're just losing that.
You know, while you're on that, question for David, I guess you can answer. Isn't there, and I'm going to use straight terms here, a de facto moratorium on the prairie? That is to say that we're operating, and maybe moratorium's a bad word, but under a minimum lot size because of the potential for septics over the aquifer?
Well, there's no argument that Panhandle Health regulates on a 5-acre
Sure.
basis. I would be hesitant to stretch that to mean it's a moratorium.
No, yeah, okay, bad word, go ahead.
I think you just look at it as one of the ways in which growth can be managed. It's no coincidence that Panhandle Health staff has asked me to look into that area because they're concerned that their 5-acre minimum is not good enough.
In terms of,
There's still concerns that the aquifer can be polluted. It's too much density over the aquifer.
interesting. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David, doesn't the comp plan kind of designate the prairie as the first build-out part of growth? I mean, I'm not saying it correctly, but
Our comp plan's weak in that area. That's one of the things I want to fix over time, is it,
Yeah, I think you're
we've
right.
done a poor job in the past of taking data and extrapolating rational planning based on the data. And actually, that's one of the conversations Mary and I are gonna have with Chair Levine this week, is we're now in the second round of work. We've got the update done. We're now drilling down on data. And I'll be tasking the staff to for the first time, actually take data and present back to you and the public, what is this data telling us? And then policy can ensue from that. But at the moment, it's not at all really clear as to what you just brought up.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, 9:38, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.